Hello there, and welcome to the 2024 webinar for the Washington Climate Corps Network Grant Program. My name is Adam Schmid, and I am the administrator for the Washington Climate Corps Network, or WCCN for short, and I'll be your narrator throughout today's presentation. This webinar was recorded on June 23rd, 2024, and slight changes may have occurred to the website or materials I'll be referencing throughout today's webinar, so I encourage you to go to our website to assure the most accurate and updated information at the time of viewing. We also will have updated documents, deadlines, and any other news related to the WCCN on our webpage. But over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be previewing for you some information you'll need to get started and begin an application for the grant program. Let's get started. What will we be talking about today? Here's a preview of our webinar. As we start, we'll get into some of the background about what is the Washington Climate Corps Network. I'll talk through a little bit about eligibility requirements, not only for you, but for types of projects you can invest in, what the process and the details of the timeline will be like. Finally, we'll talk over a few resources and tools we've made available to make sure you're aligned and eligible and competitive for the grant program. To start things off, what is the Washington Climate Corps Network, or WCCN? In this section, you'll learn a bit about the background of our funding and the establishing legislation. I'll share our brand new logo, which you saw on the title slide, so you can keep an eye out for any other projects in your community that are connected to the network. And finally, we'll share a bit more of the model of our network structure to hopefully give you a better perspective on how we might be unique or similar to other state programs. The Washington Climate Corps Network was established by Second Substitute House Bill 1176 and was signed into law on July 23, 2023. This empowered Serve Washington, my agency I work for, under the Office of Financial Management here at the state of Washington, to do a few key things. Really, the purpose of the network and our duty as Serve Washington is to support and grow climate-related service opportunities for young adults and veterans with the objective of building clean energy, low-carbon, climate-resilient communities, economies, and ecosystems, while also providing education, workforce development, and career pathways with a focus on and working with overburdened communities specifically. It also empowers us to, as you can see here, establish some common requirements for participating, administer that service learning program, and generally make climate-related service programs more accessible for folks here in Washington. We recently launched our brand new logos displayed above. We want to promote the fact that the WCCN is focused on promoting a network model of service, as we do not believe a typical state-managed service program will achieve our goals of building a climate-resilient Washington. More on that in the next slide. These icons and the network node iconography will be a very common theme throughout our materials, so be on the lookout for them. You may also notice down here at the bottom, we are funded by the Washington Climate Commitment Act. Most projects will be required to share this branding as well, and those branding and communications requirements will be made available to successful applicants. This graphic demonstrates the layers of the Washington Climate Corps Network. Our model of service relies upon a network of partners coming together to create a climate-resilient future. At the top, the WCCN is funded by the Climate Commitment Act and is based in partnerships with a by and for theory of change. We alone will not be able to bring about sufficient solutions to our climate challenges and must come together and reinforce our strengths as a network. Serve Washington will be a crucial partner in administering grant funds, establishing partnerships with similarly aligned partners, and advocating for more to join the cause and build a climate-resilient future. In the third layer here, we see partnerships, networks, and professional educational associations as being critical to the development of those pathways for those seeking careers in the green or blue economies of the future. Further down on the fourth layer, grantee organizations will host our architects, as we're calling them, or service members as you might know them, and they must demonstrate a clear ability to partner with their community to create meaningful service projects that meet the goals of that community. This is what we were referring to earlier whenever I said a heavy focus on working with and in overburdened communities. Finally, here at the center of the network model are the architects and mentors in climate service projects. We use the term architects to demonstrate that they play a crucial role in developing the linkages of our network. And these can be any folks who are eligible to be participating in a service project, students, veterans, young adults, members of overburdened communities. In summary, the network is not maintained and implemented by a single entity. We are hoping to build a network of partnerships, institutions, and motivated individuals to create a statewide impact towards our climate resilient goals. Now that we've gone through the basics of the WCCN, let's talk through what you can expect from the grant program, its eligibility requirements, and the process for applying and receiving grant funds. Participation, eligibility, and requirements. So first off, who is even eligible to be an architect or a service member, as you might refer to them? Our establishing legislation identifies a few key requirements listed here under the first bullet to my left. Please note that they do not have to hold all of these identities, but must hold at least one. So you don't have to be both a person between 17 and 31 and a veteran. It could be one or the other. Although we do not require the architects to be from the communities served by a proposed project, we are interested in partnering with organizations and projects conducting their member recruitment from the community that's being served. If you're hosting a site or a project in a specific area of Washington, we want to work with organizations that are recruiting members from that community to be active participants in the project. Architects must also receive a living allowance or a stipend and participate in WCCN networking and advancement opportunities. These are subject to change, but typically you can expect 1 to 4 opportunities a year where we might pull folks together and offer them a training or some sort of service learning component. Finally, let's review who is eligible to apply and receive a grant as a host for these architects. Eligibility criteria. Serve Washington is interested in partnering with folks from across the state. We recognize that partnerships do not work with a one-size-fits-all approach, and thus we are interested in partnering with a variety of organizations from nonprofits, academic institutions, local governments, tribes or tribal organizations, and even smaller community organizations, even those needing fiscal sponsors, all could be eligible to receive grant funds through this program. If I didn't name your organization there, or you're not quite sure if you fit into this eligibility criteria, I really encourage you to reach out, as our establishing legislation offers us a lot of flexibility in creating good partnerships across the state. If you're eligible as an entity to apply, you must also be willing to commit to achieving the goals of the WCCN, the member commitments, and work to maintain a minimum of 60% of service being conducted by and for members of overburdened communities. Our intention behind these requirements is to build resiliency in local communities and youth and make sure that we are leaving a lasting impression, not just that one service project impact. And if you're a successful applicant, you may be awarded multiple times. So don't fret if you're not just receiving one time or creating one perfect project. We're interested in maintaining lasting partnerships over time as well. On the topic of overburdened communities, let's look at that on the next slide. So prioritizing overburdened communities. I've been talking a lot about that overburdened communities language, both from our establishing legislation and from our WCCN goals. So our grant program is prioritizing overburdened communities in both the projects and the partner organizations that we select for the grant funding. We define overburdened communities as vulnerable populations in a geographic area facing combined multiple environmental harms and health impacts, and include but are not limited to highly impacted communities. You can read more about this pretty layered definition in our definitions document and toolkit, and the information I have on screen will be available in your application as well, and you'll be able to use the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool as well as the Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map to give you a better understanding of which communities are labeled as overburdened communities. If you need any assistance in navigating or utilizing these tools, of course, you're encouraged to contact our team via email. And just to encourage you to, as you're beginning the process of writing a letter or developing an application, to familiarize yourselves with these tools a little bit before finalizing those key details about the project location and the community you'll be working with. So now that we've discussed a little bit about the eligible members, organizations, and communities, let's take a look at the eligible expenses for WCCN funds. Eligible expenses. There are 4 main areas of eligible expenses for the WCCN grant program. They are as follows: personnel, or costs related to the organization's staffing, such as wages, salaries, and benefits. Goods and services, which includes the majority of anticipated expenses to execute the project and support the architects or the members themselves. So keynote here, members' stipends are different from wages and salaries and benefits for folks from the organization. Please make sure and make that clear whenever you are submitting a project budget. Travel may be an eligible expense as well. Supporting expenses for the member to get to and from the project, especially if there is a lot of travel involved. We understand that in rural communities that can be a big barrier as well. And finally, indirect costs. These can be up to 10% of your total budget requests and are generally aimed to support any other elements of the organization or project that wouldn't neatly fit into one of the previous three categories, and generally are not directly tied to the project itself. There may be other expenses you all anticipate for your project. If that comes up, please feel free to reach out to us and do your best in estimating where those expenses may fall, and we'll work with you, if successful, throughout the contracting process to get those expenses properly allocated. But we anticipate for most of you, many of your costs will fall into the first two categories. But if there are questions or desired exceptions, of course, contact our team, and we may be able to adjust on a case-by-case basis. Now, you may be interested in supporting a larger or smaller project involving one or many of these categories. So let's discuss the funding levels and request requirements for your projects. Tiered funding levels. The WCCN Rolling Grant Program has two tiers of funding available to reflect the diversity of potential projects and invite a wider variety of projects, both in their scale, but also their scope and their length of service as well. The first tier is our Tier 1 or Cedar level, and it supports grants requesting anywhere from $2,000 to $35,000. These are intended for smaller organizations and typically smaller scale projects that could be completed within a year or a few months even. This level prioritizes spending on community participation and can support projects that are new or perhaps pilots for the community. Reporting requirements are generally lighter, and again, we want to invite applications with limited capacity as well, recognizing that a lot of organizations that are smaller operate with a lot of volunteers or a lot of part-time staff, so we try to make this level very accessible for folks, for organizations of that size. The second tier, or Tier 2, is our Hemlock level, and this supports really any proposals that are over $35,000 in their request. These are eligible for small and larger organizations, and they involve slightly more reporting requirements, with budgets that can support more service members, more outreach, and more project costs generally. Both levels may support similar projects, but our intention is to encourage and expand the network across the state to smaller, community-based, or even newer organizations here in Washington as well. If you're unsure of which to apply for, of course, you can always reach out and we'll provide you as much eligibility information as we can and allow you to make the best decision possible for your organization. Next, let's talk about application process. So that's it for the eligibility components. In this section, we'll go over the process by which you submit your letter of interest and develop your application, the timeline you can expect, and finally the resources you need to put forth your best application. How do I apply? Well, if you've made it this far, you've probably already visited our website and seen our toolkit, which is linked online, as well as, of course, this webinar. Congratulations, that's a huge first step. These are going to be your top resources as you make your way through to the next key components of the application process. The first of which is writing a letter of interest, which includes the overview of the proposed service project, the communities you intend to serve, and the connections that project will have to the architect's education and career development. Of course, in our toolkit and on our website are our stated goals and priorities for the Washington Climate Corps Network, and any letter of interest should make sure and testify to how your project will meet the goals of the Washington Climate Corps Network. Once your letter has been submitted via the Smartsheet form on our website, Serve Washington will review the letters and invite applicants whose projects and organizations are eligible and align with the goals of the Washington Climate Corps Network. Applicants will also receive feedback on their letter of interest and will be given a link to our applicant Smartsheet form. If there are any components of your proposed project that seem out of line or not a great fit for the purpose of the Washington Climate Corps Network, Serve Washington staff will also make that very clear, and of course you can ask for any clarification or follow-up at that time as well. Applications, of course, are reviewed on a monthly timeline, which are also available to you in the application toolkit, so I highly encourage you to check that out. And both the letter of interest and the application will be submitted through a Smartsheet form, which are either available online or will be emailed to you in response to your letter of interest. Next, let's look at the timeline. Here's a preview of the estimated monthly timeline for 2024. The Rolling Grants application was released on May 10th, 2024, and will be iteratively updated from the applicant feedback. You're watching our online webinar, nicely done. This will always be available through our applicant toolkit online. All applications are reviewed following the 21st day of the month. This means whether you apply on the 2nd or the 20th of that month, the review process begins on the 21st day. This helps us stay organized and provide timely reviews of all applications. Our goal is to send formal notice to all applicants by the 21st day of the month following your application. As an example, if you applied on May 20th, your application would be reviewed in the first 2 weeks of June, and you'd be notified of your application by the 21st of June. This timeline is subject to change as we may receive more or fewer applications in a given month. We will communicate with all applicants if any delays are anticipated. If you are successful in your application, our goal will be to share a draft grant agreement by the 28th day of the month following your application. Your project summary information, budget, and milestones will be inserted into our contracts template, and you will be invited to review and make adjustments to the contract at that time. Let's take a quick review of all the tools available to you throughout this process to make your application as best as possible. Tools and resources. This is a brief preview of all the documents and resources you have available throughout your letter of interest and application process. If you have any questions, I encourage you contacting our email, wccn@ofm.wa.gov, for further support. It's listed here on our slide, and it'll be available at the end of our webinar as well. In short, there are 4 crucial documents you will want to utilize as you're drafting your application. I'll go through a few of them in detail on the next slide, but I also want to highlight for the budget worksheet, this is a document you'll be asked to download, fill out, and then upload as part of your application. So please be sure to familiarize yourself with that as well prior to beginning your Smartsheet form application. Applicant documents. So this slide just contains the overview sections for each of these documents, which are important as you'll begin drafting your application and of course your letter of interest. The applicant toolkit here in orange contains most of what we've covered in this webinar. I really want to also highlight, it talks about the commitments, the eligibility requirements, and some of the details requested of members and of the hosts or the programs. So really valuable before you start your application to know what we at Servois are prioritizing and what we're looking for from successful applicants. The application preview document really is just a Word document that takes all the Smartsheet questions and puts them into a space where you can begin drafting your responses. When you get the Smartsheet link, if your letter of interest is successful, this link is only useful for submitting the application. And I highly recommend using the document to actually draft your responses, as Smartsheet can't save your responses over time. Let's say you begin answering a few of the questions in Project Overview in your Smartsheet form, and something comes up, you need to pause or you need to take a step away. It's really difficult to save those responses in Smartsheet, so definitely recommend download this preview, type out and draft your answers. When you're ready to submit, you can copy them, paste them into the Smartsheet form, and hit submit much more easily. Okay, now that we've read through a few of the resources and you've consulted with your community, it's time to submit your letter of interest. The image on the left here is a screenshot of our webpage. Note that there are 2 items that I've highlighted in red here at the bottom. The toolkit is available in blue text that reads Applicant Toolkit. Click on this and it should open a PDF of the toolkit for you to review and download. And the button in the bottom left, which says Submit a Letter of Interest, will link you to a Smartsheet page that I'll show here momentarily. This is the top 2 things you'll need before you begin your letter of interest. Of course, here on our page, I've also shown the email, wccn@ofm.wa.gov. Don't be afraid to send us any question or concern you may have prior to writing your letter of interest. Here's a snapshot of the Washington Climate Corps Network's letter of interest form. Again, this is run through Smartsheet and really just has a few key questions. Give us some information about who to contact related to the letter, a few of the counties you propose to support through a project, and in the red box highlighted at the bottom, you will click on this area, or you could drag your document into this area to upload your formal letter of interest. No formatting requirements here, just submit the best letter you can write and make sure it contains all the crucial information I've listed here, such as an overview of your organization, the community supported, and so on. At this point, once you submit your letter of interest, the application process takes off. Serve Washington will contact you with follow-up questions, any concerns of eligibility fit, and updates on the status of your proposal. If you are deemed eligible and the project seems to align with the goals of the Washington Climate Core Network, you will be emailed from one of us here at Serve Washington. You may also revise and resubmit as desired if you are not eligible or if the project is not well aligned to the goals of the Washington Climate Core Network. Again, throughout this process, the toolkit will be your guide for crafting a project which is both eligible and aligned with the goals of the WCCN. So I highly encourage downloading and using that toolkit. And that's it. Thanks for sticking with us in this webinar through to the very end. If you have any further questions, again, this email at the bottom of the page is the #1 resource for you beyond your applicant toolkit and the documents we've talked about already. We are really interested in growing partners through the grant program and through informal partnerships as well. Even if you're not eligible for a grant contract, you may still be a valued member of the network as we build climate resiliency throughout Washington State. We plan on hosting networking opportunities, educational opportunities, and we want to go out into the community and learn about what is your community facing and how can our network program provide another resource for you in your community as we all struggle with the detrimental effects of climate change. I want to wish you all good luck. For those of you interested in applying, please reach out if you have any questions or ideas for our team to consider, and I look forward to hearing again from you very soon.